Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are totally debunking some massive cinematic myths and uncovering the literal biological reality behind white lions. Honestly, if you've ever watched a movie and thought you knew exactly what these magnificent creatures are all about, well, get ready to have your perspective entirely shifted. We're going to bridge that gap between Hollywood storytelling and actual grounded biology. Here's how we're going to do it. We've got 5 quick areas to cover today. 1. Pop culture myth versus reality. 2. Albinism and Leucism etymology. 3. The visual proof in the pigment. 4. The severe impact on vision. And finally, 5. Their South African genetic origins.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Pop Culture Myth versus Reality.
So Disney's Mufasa, the Lion King, pushes this super dramatic narrative for these animals. You get quotes like, "The outsiders, a rival hostile pride, cast out and ostracized, driving them to form their own isolated and aggressive group." I mean, Hollywood absolutely loves a good villain origin story, right? They paint white lions, like the character Kyros, as these banished outcasts who are exiled purely because of their unique fur color. But let's pause and actually contrast that movie myth with scientific reality. In nature, white lions are not an aggressive faction of outcasts, and they definitely aren't a separate species. They're completely normal African lions, regular Panthera leo. Here's the less dramatic, but honestly way more beautiful reality. If a white cub is born to parents who both carry the required recessive gene, it's literally just another member of the family. Sure, their pale coats might make camouflage a bit trickier, but they are absolutely not ostracized by their pride. Moving right along to Section 2, Albinism and Leucism etymology. Now, while both of these words fundamentally translate to white, their distinct linguistic roots really give away how vastly different these two conditions are. The word albino comes from the Latin root albus, which was adapted by the Portuguese back in the 17th century to describe folks with light skin and hair. On the flip side, Leucism comes from the ancient Greek word leukos. So we're looking at two totally different ancient roots describing two fundamentally different biological realities. Makes sense, right? Let's dig into Section 3, Visual Proof in the Pigment. Okay, so human albinism is a systemic genetic condition. It causes a massive deficiency of melanin, affecting the hair, the skin, and the eyes. But lion leucism, that merely reduces color pigment in the fur. Look at this gorgeous group of 3 lions. Your eye is instantly drawn to that pale white fur, obviously. But really look closely at their faces. See the dark pigment on their nose pads, the dark lining of their lips? If this was systemic albinism, those areas would lack dark pigment entirely. This right here is visual proof that leucism is just a localized, partial loss of pigmentation. Let's zoom out a bit and see how this looks out in the wild. Here's a magnificent lion resting on some rocks. And even from a distance, that stark contrast is undeniable. Check out the dark pigment perfectly retained on its paw pads tucked in the front there, and those dark rims circling its eyes. A systemically pale body caused by albinism simply wouldn't have those deep, dark pigmented features. It just wouldn't happen. And looking directly into this lion's eyes gives us the final piece of the visual puzzle. You're looking at normally pigmented blue eyes surrounded by this stark black eyeliner. White lions usually have eye colors right in the standard range for lions, so blue, hazel, or golden. In human albinism, the iris lacks pigment, which makes it translucent. Light actually bounces off the blood vessels at the back of the retina, which can sometimes make the eyes appear pink or red. But as you can see, there is absolutely zero translucency here. That brings us to Section 4, the severe impact on vision. See, the biological realities of human albinism go way, way beyond pale skin or hair. Because melanin essentially acts as the scaffolding for proper eye development, lacking it systemically leads to severe, permanent visual impairments. Individuals often have to deal with extreme photophobia, that's intense light sensitivity, because that translucent iris just fails to block out light. They also frequently experience something called nystagmus, which is an involuntary bouncing of the eyes, along with an underdeveloped fovea. The fovea is the part of the eye responsible for sharp vision, so this often results in chronic blurred vision. Conversely, and this is absolutely vital to understand, leucistic lions maintain perfectly normal visual functionality. Because leucism only reduces the fur pigment while leaving the vital eye pigmentation totally intact, white lions suffer absolutely none of those developmental eye issues found in albinism. Seriously, no nystagmus, no underdeveloped fovea, no photophobia. They possess the exact same keen apex predator eyesight as their tawny-colored siblings. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, South African genetic origins. Here is the thing about albinism. It's a broad, universal genetic mutation. It can pop up in practically any animal species or human population on Earth. But this specific lion leucism we've been talking about, it is highly, highly localized. It's driven by a super rare recessive regional gene that is native strictly to the Timbavati and Kruger regions of South Africa. They aren't some rogue faction wandering the continent, and they certainly aren't a separate subspecies. They are a naturally occurring wonder heavily concentrated in one very specific geographic ecosystem.
So as we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with kind of a provocative question to chew on. Are cinematic myths blinding us to the localized beauty and reality of natural genetic diversity? We've seen today that these animals aren't some aggressive outcasts with a melanin deficiency. They're standard African lions with a rare, hyper-localized genetic trait that leaves their health 100% intact. Isn't the actual reality of this rare evolutionary adaptation just thriving naturally in South Africa, like, far more fascinating than any villain myth Hollywood could invent? I certainly think so for sure. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I really hope you walk away with a whole new appreciation for the real white lion.